So what matters for Bitcoin today? Are all the technical analysts correct about impending correction down to 8,000? Well, today we're going to answer these questions and more. However, before we get into it, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. This is iFinance, so let's get into it. After a long wait for the Fed, I believe that now we're entering an exciting period for Bitcoin. This is because the Federal Reserve has confirmed that the United States is indeed embarking on a journey that will probably end up destroying the dollar as the world's reserve currency. This process might take a long time. In fact, I think it might take a few years, maybe even a couple of decades. However, in my view, I think this will probably happen sooner rather than later. You might ask why. Well, the thing is that recently there has been some developments that I believe are being discounted by mainstream news and most analysts as well. For example, we recently saw President Trump tweeting about Bitcoin. He claimed that it was worthless, dangerous, and that its value was based on thin air. Now, obviously, I think that Bitcoin has way more value than the US dollar for many reasons. However, as we all know, the US dollar is actually based on thin air, and it is also continually being devalued. So I believe that President Trump's statements on Bitcoin are plain wrong. But what's important about this is that governments are clearly scared of Bitcoin. Naturally, there's little they can do about it, but this just shows how disruptive Bitcoin can be. And in fact, I think this can change the world for the better. And honestly, I believe that there are many people in the government who think this way as well. For example, we see Steve Bannon, who was once a close advisor to the president, commenting positively on Bitcoin. He says that cryptocurrencies can be, quote, very important in the global populist revolt, end quote, and that, quote, governments and banks obviously want to stay with fiat currency, end quote, which is why they defend it, as you might expect. However, since Bannon isn't working for the government anymore, he can actually speak his mind, and he sees the real benefits of Bitcoin, unlike President Trump, who obviously sees Bitcoin as a threat to the US dollar, which is why he has to defend it. After all, he's the president of the United States. Otherwise, honestly, I don't think he would truly feel about Bitcoin that way. But in any case, this shows how far Bitcoin has come. Still, I think that this is just the beginning, as in the future I expect Bitcoin to overtake all major fiat currencies and become the standard. And here is where the Federal Reserve comes into play. As most of you know, I've been expecting that whenever the Federal Reserve cuts rates, we would see a positive effect on the price of Bitcoin. And guess what? So far, this dynamic has been playing out very nicely. After all, you can see that the price of Bitcoin rallied after the 30th of July, which coincided with the Federal Reserve meeting that decided to cut interest rates by 25 basis points. This tells us that indeed, Bitcoin is responding to the value of the dollar. However, if you think about it, the Federal Reserve wasn't as dovish as the market expected, which means that the Fed basically didn't pump as much money as the market wished. It's kind of like that, which is why the stock market tanked and why Bitcoin didn't rise as much as it could have. I talked about this on Stock Tweets and Twitter, so make sure you follow me there as well. But in any case, I see that articles have come out saying that the Fed is irrelevant for Bitcoin. And in my view, this is just plain ridiculous. After all, the Fed has a direct effect on the price of the US dollar, and Bitcoin is priced on dollars. So if the Fed affects the dollar, then it obviously has an impact on Bitcoin. It is so obvious, yet I see the article claiming that the price of Bitcoin is based on speculation. However, I actually believe that Bitcoin tracks the US dollar devaluation much better than anything else. You see, one way of looking at it is that whenever the price of Bitcoin goes up, it shows that the US dollar is worth less than before. And this is why I think that for Bitcoin to go to $1 million or even more, the US dollar will have to lose its value substantially. And this is where the trade war comes into play. You see, This is why President Trump's recent tweets regarding China tariffs has probably helped the price of Bitcoin considerably. This placed President Trump in a fascinating dynamic. You see, his advisors basically told him that the Chinese are going to wait him out until the next election. Naturally, President Trump doesn't like this, so he raised tariffs on Chinese goods by another 10% to put additional pressure on the Chinese. The result of this dynamic is that now the Federal Reserve will probably have to drop rates even further and will likely cut again in the September meeting, which is just around the corner. They have to do this to avoid crashing the economy due to higher tariffs. And, as you might expect, I believe that these additional rate cuts will probably have an even more favorable effect for Bitcoin. So I think that the Fed will now become a secular tailwind for the price of Bitcoin going forward. Still, looking at the Bitcoin technicals, many analysts are expecting a lower price, suggesting a price target of 8,000. After all, many charts suggest that this would be still healthy for the quote macro technical trend for Bitcoin. However, it is essential to note that these types of analysis completely ignore the fundamental picture that is changing underneath Bitcoin and the world. So personally, I think it is best to subordinate technical analysis to these structural developments. You can do whatever you want, but in my view, we are seeing that 1. The US wants to devalue the dollar, 2. The Europeans are going to sacrifice the euro to keep the EU, and 3. The Chinese are holding their ground in the trade war. And I think that as a result, the fiat systems in the world are going to start crumbling under Bitcoin. I think that this transition will be slow at first, which is in the stage that we are at right now. And then, all at once, suddenly everyone will start only accepting Bitcoin because they will realize that it is the only thing that truly has value. Naturally, this will take some time, but rest assured, we're headed in that direction. So I think that buying Bitcoin today is probably the best investment you can make. Obviously, you should do your own research as I'm not your financial advisor. But putting all of this together, I think the future for Bitcoin is bright. Personally, I keep buying Bitcoin whenever I can, and I believe that going forward, it will probably outperform by a large margin every other asset class available today. Therefore, I think that soon we might see more parabolas in Bitcoin that will take us well beyond the last all-time highs. But anyways, that's it for today, folks. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps a lot. With that, I will see you in the next video. Until then, keep stacking sats. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.